As part of your group presentation, you're being asked to examine the politics of problem definition for your particular policy issue. I want to take this opportunity to explore this concept in more detail in order for you to have a clear sense of what is expected on your group presentation. To do so, I will be drawing on concepts that we've examined in chapters 2, 6, 7, and 8 of your textbook. Early on in the course, we learned about the architecture of the constitutional system put in place by James Madison and his fellow framers. As you recall, Madison was preoccupied with the possibility of a tyranny of the majority, a situation whereby a majority of voters use their numerical superiority to impose undesirable policies on a distinct minority. Madison was mostly concerned that poor people would use their numerical power to deprive wealthy people of their property or otherwise undermine property rights. Accordingly, Madison designed a system that made swift and radical change quite difficult to accomplish, and we now live under a constitutional arrangement that works to force opposing factions into a protracted competition likely to result in gradual and incremental change. Our political system has multiple entry points that allow aggrieved groups to attempt to influence policy outcomes. You can seek change through the executive, legislative, or judicial branches, and you can seek change at the federal, state, or local level. The flip side of this situation is that the system therefore contains multiple veto points that allow a determined minority to resist change by blocking action in one branch of government or at one level of government. In Chapter 7, we learned that some political scientists regard this type of constitutional arrangement as conducive to a distribution of political power across a wide range of groups, with no single group exercising dominance across a wide range of policy issues. This theoretical model, known as pluralism, depicts political competition as analogous to economic competition in a free market system. Groups are free to organize around their respective policy positions and can enter or exit the political marketplace at will. Those groups with the most attractive product, i.e. the most attractive policy positions, will attract the most support in this political marketplace and will therefore have the upper hand when it comes to influencing policy outcomes. However, since citizens have diverse interests and will be able to choose which groups they wish to support, pluralists conclude that groups will have to achieve their goals through negotiation and compromise, and power will thus be broadly distributed to plural groups in society. Now, we also learned in Chapter 7 that the pluralist model has come under criticism from some political scientists who contend that the model is based on some faulty assumptions. One critique, associated with a scholar named Mansur Olson, is that it's a mistake to assume that all groups face the same degree of challenges when seeking to engage in collective action. Olson pointed out that groups must overcome what he called the free rider problem, and that it was easier for groups seeking private benefits to accomplish this goal compared to groups seeking public benefits. As you recall, private benefits can be restricted, while public benefits are available to all members of society. Another criticism of pluralism is directed at the methodology that pluralists employ when analyzing group competition. Pluralists assume that by studying outcomes, such as a congressional vote or a court ruling, one can identify the various winners and losers in the policy process. But critics point out that some groups may view the constellation of forces arrayed against them as so challenging to overcome that they deliberately choose not to join the fight. Pluralists would interpret this action as a sign of complacency or satisfaction with the current political situation. But critics argue that just because someone doesn't raise a fuss doesn't necessarily mean that person is happy with how things are going. The discussion of pluralism in your textbook also raises another criticism of this model, this one put forth by a political scientist named E.E. Schachtschneider, who quipped that the flaw in the pluralist heaven is that the chorus sings with a distinctly upper-class accent. In other words, Schachtschneider believed that pluralists failed to recognize that groups with access to more material resources, usually money, have more success in the policy arena. This view has been borne out by other political scientists whose research has conclusively demonstrated that in contests between the haves and the have-nots, the haves usually come out ahead. It's helpful here to remember Madison's words from Federalist Number 10. I quote, but the most common and durable source of factions has been the various and unequal distribution of property. Those who hold and those who are without property have ever formed distinct interests in society. As I pointed out, Madison designed our constitutional architecture to protect the minority of haves against the wishes of the majority of the have-nots. I want to turn now to another contribution by Mr. Schachtschneider to our understanding of group competition, something he referred to as the mobilization of bias. To explain this concept, I want to use a simple analogy. I know that this is not the case for every student in the course, but most of you probably have at least one sibling, and at some point, maybe recently, you and your sibling were likely to have been beating on each other. Now, whoever was getting the worst of the beating would try to alter the circumstances by calling out for third-party intervention. Mom, Dad, help me. At the same time, whoever was administering the beating would likely respond by saying, shut up. If you call for Mom one more time, I'm only going to hit you harder. Now, Schachtschneider made a similar argument when examining group competition in the political arena. Those groups who were in a position of relative disadvantage, say a social movement seeking equal rights, would try to broaden the scope of the conflict and bring in third parties to alter the balance of power. And they would attempt to do so by employing language that invites others to sympathize with their struggles. On the other hand, those groups in a position of relative advantage would try to narrow the scope of the conflict and maintain the current balance of power. And they would attempt to do so by employing language that discourages others from getting involved. The political equivalent of, everything's fine, Mom, there's no need for you to come upstairs. The final introductory point I want to make here is that much of the competition these days between groups seeking political influence takes place in the media, both in the traditional mass media world of newspapers, magazines, and news shows on radio and TV, as well as in the relatively new space of social media. I want you to think of the media as a sort of colossal political arena in which contending parties do battle to influence both political leaders and ordinary citizens. And this battle often takes the form of competing efforts to define the specific nature of the political problem that needs to be addressed. This is what is meant by the politics of problem definition. Whichever group is most successful in the contest to define the nature of the problem will enjoy a significant advantage in being able to define the nature of the appropriate solution, and will thus be in a better position to achieve its desired policy outcome. We can observe all sorts of examples of this politics of problem definition. If, say, for example, the problem is defined as a potentially lethal virus spreading rapidly throughout our communities that can only be mitigated by avoiding close contact with other people, then the solution consists of wearing masks, maintaining social distancing, and avoiding crowded indoor spaces with poor ventilation. On the other hand, if the problem is defined as a hoax perpetrated by one's political opponents, or as something akin to the ordinary flu, then the solution is to go on with business as usual and refrain from imposing restrictions on the public. Let's take another example. The voters in the state of Washington just passed a referendum on sex education in public schools. This can be seen as one type of solution if the problem is defined as a lack of adequate knowledge on the part of teenagers regarding safe sexual behavior. However, if the problem had been defined as one of teenage immorality, then the solution would be to censor certain TV shows and make kids attend church more frequently. Not that long ago, one candidate for the U.S. Senate even went so far as to say the problem of teenage pregnancy could be solved if girls were just taught to, quote, keep their knees together. I'm not making this up. As you can see, different definitions of the problem can lead to radically different solutions. As part of your group presentation, you will need to examine the contest over problem definition as it applies to your group's chosen issue. Who are the primary actors or groups involved in the policy debate over your issue? What is the definition of the problem that each actor or group is attempting to advance? Are there efforts to utilize mass media to advance their particular definition of the problem, helped or hindered by the prevalent types of information biases we can observe in news coverage of political issues? How does their use of language reflect their efforts to either broaden or narrow the scope of the conflict, to use Schattschneider's phrase? How are each group's proposed solutions connected to their respective definitions of the problem? If a group emerges as a winner in the policy debate, is it due to their superior ability to define the nature of the problem? These are the types of questions that should inform your group's approach to the content requirements I've listed for the group project. Okay, I hope that this lecture has been helpful in advancing your understanding of the politics of problem definition. But if you have any questions regarding this or any other aspects of the group project, please let me know. Thanks for watching.